Lauren thought she knew her mother, Nancy, but when she announced her pregnancy, Nancy's reaction wasn't joy. It was pure terror. Nancy knelt on the living room floor and begged her daughter not to have this baby. She begged with tears in her eyes, desperation in her voice. What could make a mother so desperate? What secret could she be hiding? The truth was hidden in medical records Nancy swore never to reveal. When Lauren finally found out, she realized her mother wasn't trying to control her. Nancy was trying to save her, and that secret would change everything between them forever. There are moments in life that change everything. Moments when happiness turns to confusion, and love seems to turn into rejection. For Lauren, that moment came on a sunny spring afternoon as she held a positive pregnancy test in her hands. She was 32, in a stable marriage with Stephen, and had a solid career. It was the perfect time to fulfill her dream of becoming a mother. She couldn't wait to tell Nancy, her mother, the news. But Nancy's reaction was something Lauren could never have imagined. There were no hugs. There were no tears of joy. What Lauren saw on her mother's face was something that haunted her for months. Pure fear, absolute terror, and a desperate plea that made no sense. Before I continue this story, tell me something. What city and country are you watching from right now? Let us know in the comments. We love to hear where our viewers are from. Lauren parked the car in front of her mother's house, her heart pounding. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and the May sun shone brightly over the rooftops of the quiet neighborhood where Nancy had lived for over 20 years. Lauren glanced at the pregnancy test in her purse for the 10th time that day. 2 pink lines. Positive. She and Stephen had been planning this for months. They stopped using birth control, started taking vitamins, and had all the tests done. And finally, had happened. She took a deep breath and got out of the car. Nancy's house was small, but always well kept. Flowers in the windows, mowed lawn, everything in place, just like Nancy had always been. Controlled, organized, a little distant, but present. Lauren rang the doorbell and waited. She heard her mother's footsteps approaching. The door opened. "Lauren, what a surprise!" Nancy said with a surprised smile. "I thought you were working today." "I asked for the afternoon off," Lauren replied, entering the house. "I needed to talk to you about something." Nancy closed the door and followed her daughter into the living room. "Is everything okay? Did something happen?" "Everything's great, Mom. In fact, it's perfect." Lauren sat on the couch and picked up her purse. Her hands were shaking a little. "I have some news." Nancy sat in the chair opposite, her hands in her lap. "What news?" Lauren took the pregnancy test out of her purse and showed it to her mother. "I'm pregnant, Mom. You're going to be a grandmother." The silence that followed was heavy. Nancy looked at the test, then at Lauren, then back at the test. Her expression changed completely. The smile disappeared, her eyes widened, and then something Lauren had never seen before, fear, genuine fear. "No," Nancy whispered. "Mother?" "No, Lauren, no, no, no." Nancy stood up from the chair, her hands covering her face. You can't do this." Lauren froze. "What are you saying?" "You can't have this baby." Nancy began pacing the room, breathing rapidly. "You need to reconsider. You need to think this through. Mom, Stephen and I planned this. We want this baby. You don't know what you're doing." Nancy stopped walking and looked at her daughter with tears in her eyes. "You don't know what it's like to be a mother. You don't know what might happen." Lauren felt her chest tighten. "What kind of reaction is that? I thought you'd be happy." "Happy?" Nancy let out a bitter laugh. "How can I be happy when you're making the biggest mistake of your life?" The words were like a slap in Lauren's face. She stood up from the couch, tears welling up in her eyes. "Biggest mistake? Mom, are you calling me a mistake?" "That's not what I meant." Nancy rubbed her face with her hands. "Lauren, please. You have an amazing career. You have freedom. You have a good life. Why would you want to throw it all away?" "Throw it away? I want to build a family." "Family." Nancy repeated the word as if it were poison. You think family is a fairy tale. You think you'll be a mother and everything will be wonderful. But it's not like that. It's not like that at all. Lauren crossed her arms, trying to contain the trembling in her hands. You're talking about yourself. You're saying you regret having me. I didn't say that. But that's what you're saying, Lauren screamed, the tears finally streaming down her face. You're saying I was a mistake, that your life would be better without me. Nancy closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she opened them again, there was a cold determination there. She walked over to Lauren and held her daughter's shoulders. Lauren, listen. I only want the best for you. And having a baby now isn't the best thing. You need to trust me. Trust you. Lauren pulled away. How can I trust you when you're reacting like this? When you can't even pretend to be happy for me? Because I know reality. I have lived reality. What reality, Mother? What are you hiding? Nancy took a step back, as if she'd been punched. For a moment, she looked like she was going to say something important. But then she shook her head. Nothing. I'm not hiding anything. I'm just trying to protect you. Protect me from what? Nancy didn't answer. She turned her head away, staring out the window. Sunlight streamed through the white curtains, illuminating half of her face. Lauren saw something in her mother's expression she'd never seen before. It wasn't just fear. It was trauma. It was old, long-held pain. Mom, talk to me, please. Nancy shook her head again. Go home, Lauren. Go talk to Stephen. Think about what you're doing. Please, that's all I ask. Think about it. Lauren grabbed her bag and walked to the door. Before leaving, she looked back one last time. Nancy was standing in the middle of the room, her arms at her sides, staring at the floor. She looked small, fragile, broken. Lauren left the house and got into her car. Only when she started the engine did she realize she was sobbing. She put her hands on the steering wheel and let the tears fall. The day that should have been the happiest of her life had turned into a nightmare, and she had no idea why. But Lauren knew one thing. There was a secret Nancy held tightly to, and that secret had to do with motherhood. Lauren wiped away her tears, took a deep breath, and placed her hand on her stomach. I'll find out, she whispered. I'll find out what she's hiding. Now tell me something. Have you ever experienced a situation where someone you love reacted completely unexpectedly to your good news? Share in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to our channel using the subscribe button or the QR code that appears on your screen, and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any exciting stories like this. Lauren arrived home still shaking. Stephen was in the kitchen preparing dinner when she walked in. He looked at his wife and immediately dropped the wooden spoon he was holding. What happened? He walked over to her and cupped her face. Did you tell your mom? Lauren nodded, unable to speak. Stephen pulled her into a tight hug. She buried her face in his chest and let the tears flow again. Wasn't she happy? Stephen asked quietly. She asked me not to have the baby, Lauren managed to say between sobs. She begged me, Stephen. Like I was committing a crime. Stephen tensed. She said that. She said I was making the biggest mistake of my life, that I was going to throw everything away, that I didn't know what I was doing. Lauren pulled away and wiped her face with her hands. I don't understand. What's so wrong with wanting to be a mother? Stephen ran his hand through his hair, clearly unsure of what to say. Maybe she's scared. Maybe it's just the initial shock. It wasn't shock, Stephen. It was panic. It was terror. Like I'd announced I was going to jump off a building. Lauren walked to the couch and sat down. Her mind raced, racing back in time, searching for answers. There had always been something strange about her relationship with her mother, something she could never quite put her finger on. Nancy had always been present, yet distant, caring, yet cold, as if there were an invisible wall between them. You know what? Lauren said, staring into space. My mom never talked about when I was born. Stephen sat down next to her. What do you mean? I grew up hearing stories from other mothers. Mothers telling their daughters about pregnancy, about childbirth, about the baby's first days of life. But my mother never told me any of that. Nothing. Lauren closed her eyes, remembering. She must have been about 8 when she first asked. They were in the kitchen, and a neighbor had just had a baby. The woman couldn't stop talking about the birth, how emotional it was, every detail. "Mom, what was it like when I was born?" Lauren had asked, with that childlike innocence. Nancy had stopped washing the dishes. She stood still for a few seconds. Then, without looking at her daughter, she said simply, "It was normal. You were born healthy. That's all that matters." And he changed the subject. Lauren remembered that strange feeling in her chest, like she'd asked the wrong question, like I'd touched something I shouldn't have. "She always did that," Lauren said to Stephen. "Whenever I asked her anything about my childhood, about being a baby, about pregnancy, she would change the subject, like it was a forbidden topic." "I remember you told me about this before," Stephen said. "When that you thought it was strange, that your mother never shared those memories with you." "Yeah. And today, I finally understood that it wasn't just because she was secretive, it was because there was something there she didn't want me to know." Lauren shook her head. "I remember when I was about 15, a teacher at school was pregnant. I came home all excited, talking about my belly, about the baby, about childbirth. My mom got up from the table and left the room. She just left." Stephen frowned. That never made sense anyway. "My father, when he was alive, he also avoided the subject. I think he knew it was sensitive for her. After he died, when I was 10, it got even worse. My mother completely shut down." Lauren stood up and began pacing the room. Memories came flooding back. Nancy had always been overprotective, overly protective. Lauren couldn't ride her bike without a helmet and knee pads. He couldn't play in trees. She couldn't go to sleepovers at friends' houses. Anything that involved even the slightest risk was off limits. "She raised me in a bubble," Lauren said. "I thought it was because she loved me so much. But now I realize maybe it was something else. Maybe it was fear. Afraid of what? I don't know. Afraid of getting lost. Afraid of something happening to me." Lauren stopped walking and looked at Stephen. "And there's another thing. My mother never had any more children. She never tried. Even after my father died and she was still young, she never wanted to remarry, never wanted to have more children. Maybe she didn't want to. Or maybe she was afraid," Lauren said quietly. Stephen stood up and walked over to her. "Do you think it has something to do with her past? Her life before you were born?" "There has to be. Because today I saw terror in her eyes, Stephen, real terror. Like she was reliving something horrible." Lauren placed her hand on her stomach. "And I need to find out what." Lauren thought for a moment. Nancy would never tell the truth. She already knew that. Her mother had built high walls around her secrets. But walls can be climbed. Secrets can be discovered. "My Aunt Dorothy," Lauren said suddenly. "My mom's older sister. They haven't spoken in years, but she lives 2 hours away. If anyone knows anything about my mom's past, it's her." Stephen nodded. "Are you going to talk to her?" "I will, tomorrow." Lauren took a deep breath. "Because I'm not giving up on this baby, but I'm also not going to live the rest of my life not knowing why my mother reacted that way." Stephen pulled her into another hug. "I'm with you, whatever you need." Lauren rested her head on his shoulder and closed her eyes. Outside, the sun was setting. The shadows were growing longer. And somewhere, Nancy was alone in her house, harboring a secret that weighed more heavily than Lauren could ever imagine. A secret that had the power to change everything. The next few days were tense. Nancy called 3 times the next day. Lauren let all her calls go to voicemail. She wasn't ready to talk to her mother. Not after that reaction. Not before she learned the truth. On Thursday morning, Lauren was at work when her cell phone rang again. It was Nancy. This time, Lauren answered. "Hello?" "Lauren, thank God. I was worried. You didn't answer my calls." "I was busy, Mom." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Lauren, I know you're upset with me, but I need you to listen to me." I'm listening. Not over the phone. Come to my house. Please. Tonight. I need to talk to you properly. Lauren stared at the computer screen, not really seeing anything. Part of her didn't want to go, but another part needed to hear what Nancy had to say. Okay, I'll come over after work. Thank you, daughter. I'll wait for you. Lauren hung up and stared at the phone. Stephen had been right when he said she needed to give her mother a chance to explain. Maybe Nancy had a point. Maybe there was something Lauren wasn't understanding. At 6 o'clock in the evening, Lauren parked in front of Nancy's house again. The sky was gray, heavy with clouds. It looked like rain was about to fall at any moment. Lauren rang the doorbell and waited. Nancy opened the door almost immediately. Her face was tired, with dark circles under her eyes, as if she hadn't slept well. Come in, daughter. Lauren walked in and followed her mother into the kitchen. A cup of tea was already prepared on the table, waiting for her. Nancy sat down and motioned for Lauren to sit down too. I made it just the way you like it. With honey. Lauren took the cup but didn't drink. She just held it, feeling the warmth in her hands. You said you needed to talk to me. Nancy took a deep breath. Lauren, I know I reacted badly when you told me about the pregnancy. I know I hurt you. And I'm sorry for that. I really am. Then why did you react that way? Because I care about you. Because I love you. And because I know things you don't. What things? Nancy looked at her hands. Pregnancy and childbirth aren't the fairy tale people paint them to be. They're dangerous. Very dangerous. Mom, millions of women have babies every day. And thousands of them die every day too. Nancy looked up, and there was an intensity there that frightened Lauren. Did you know the United States has one of the highest maternal mortality rates among developed countries? Did you know a woman can bleed to death in minutes during childbirth? Lauren felt butterflies in her stomach. You're trying to scare me. I'm trying to make you see the reality. Childbirth is dangerous, Lauren. You could hemorrhage. You could get high blood pressure. You could have seizures. You could get an infection. So many things could go wrong. That's why there are hospitals, doctors, technology. Technology doesn't save everyone. Nancy's voice came out louder than she intended. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to yell. Mom, what happened to you? Why are you so afraid of this? Nancy shook her head. I've seen things. I know people who have been through terrible things, and I don't want that to happen to you. What people? What situations? It doesn't matter. It does matter. Lauren slammed her cup down, making the tea splash. It matters because you're asking me to give up my baby because of something you won't tell me. I'm not asking you to give up. I'm asking you to think, reflect, consider all the options. What options? Never have children. Live in fear of something that might never happen. Nancy got up and walked to the window. Outside, it had begun to rain. Thick drops pounded against the glass. You're young, Lauren. You think you're invincible, but you're not. No one is. I know I'm not invincible, but I'm also not going to live in fear of everything. Maybe you should. Nancy turned to look at her daughter. Maybe a little fear would keep you alive. Lauren felt the tears come back. Why are you doing this? Why can't you just be happy for me? Because I love you too much to lie. Because I love you too much to pretend everything is okay when it's not. You're not okay, Mom. I'm okay. I'm pregnant. I'm healthy. I'm happy. Or at least I was, until you turned this into a nightmare. Nancy took a step toward her daughter. Lauren, please, just wait a little. Just think about it a little longer. It doesn't have to be now. You can have children later, when you're more ready. More prepared for what? To die. Is that what you think will happen to me? Nancy didn't answer, but the expression on her face said it all. That was exactly what she thought. Lauren stood up and grabbed her bag. I don't believe you. I came here thinking you'd give me a real explanation, a real reason. But all you have are vague fears and scary statistics. Lauren, don't just leave. I need to go. I need to get out of here before I say something I'll regret. Lauren walked to the kitchen door, but stopped before leaving. You know what's saddest about all this, Mom? It's not that you're not happy for me. It's that you're so caught up in your own fear that you can't even see how much you're hurting me. Lauren emerged from the house into the rain. She got into her car, soaking wet, and started the engine. In the rearview mirror, she saw Nancy standing in the doorway, her hand over her mouth, crying. But Lauren didn't come back. She put the car in drive and drove away. The distance between her and her mother was growing, and Lauren didn't know if they would ever be able to get closer again. On Saturday morning, Lauren and Stephen hit the road. Aunt Dorothy's house was in a small town about 2 hours away. Lauren hadn't seen her aunt in at least 5 years. Dorothy and Nancy had had a falling out for some reason that no one had ever fully explained to Lauren. Since then, the sisters had barely spoken. "Do you think she'll want to talk to you?" Stephen asked as he drove. "I hope so. She's always been more open than my mother. Less closed off." Lauren looked out the window, watching the trees whiz by. "When I was a kid, Aunt Dorothy would always try to tell me stories about when she and my mother were young. But my mother would always interrupt. She'd always change the subject. 'Did you call to say you were going to visit?' 'No. I thought it best to show up. If I called, she might say she didn't want to talk. In person, it's harder to refuse.' They arrived in town shortly before noon. Dorothy's house was small, with a flower-filled front yard. Lauren rang the doorbell and waited. She heard footsteps approaching. The door opened. Dorothy was 60 years old, with short gray hair and blue eyes just like Nancy's. When she saw Lauren, her eyes widened. "Lauren! Oh my God! Lauren!" "Hi, Aunt Dorothy." Dorothy pulled her niece into a tight hug. "What a wonderful surprise! Come in, come in! You too, Stephen, come in." They entered the house, which smelled of fresh coffee and cake. Dorothy led them into the living room and insisted on serving coffee and slices of carrot cake. After a few minutes of polite conversation about work and life, Dorothy looked at Lauren with a more serious expression. "You didn't come all this way just to visit me, did you? Something happened." Lauren took a deep breath. "I'm pregnant, Aunt Dorothy." Dorothy's face lit up. "Oh dear, what wonderful news! Congratulations!" She looked from Lauren to Stephen and back again. "But from your face, I can imagine your mother didn't take it well." "How do you know?" Dorothy gave a sad smile. "Because I know my sister, and I figured this would happen someday." Lauren leaned forward. "Auntie, what happened to my mom? Why is she so afraid of pregnancy and childbirth?" Dorothy was quiet for a moment. She put her coffee cup down and folded her hands in her lap. "Your mother never told you about her past, did she?" "No. She never tells anything. It's as if her life only began when I was born. That's because she wants to forget everything that came before." Dorothy sighed. "Lauren, your mother had a very difficult life. Much more difficult than you imagine. Tell me, please." Dorothy looked at Stephen, then at Lauren. "Your mother got pregnant when she was 16. Lauren felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. "What? She was just a girl. She was a sophomore in high school. Her boyfriend was an 18-year-old boy. When she found out she was pregnant, he disappeared. He just left town." Lauren clapped her hand over her mouth. "My mom had a baby at 16. She did. A boy. But she didn't keep him." Dorothy wiped away a tear that had begun to fall. "Our mother, your grandmother, wouldn't allow it. She said Nancy was too young, that it would ruin her life, that no one would want to marry an unwed mother, so she forced Nancy to give the baby up for adoption as soon as he was born." "Oh my God," Lauren whispered. Nancy had no choice. She held that baby for only a few minutes before they took him from her arms. She didn't even have time to name him, and after that, our mother forbade anyone from talking about it, as if it never happened. Stephen held Lauren's hand. She was shaking. "Nancy changed after that," Dorothy continued. "She was a happy girl, full of dreams, but after they took the baby away from her, she shut down. She stopped smiling. She stopped trusting people. She became angry at the world. She never looked for her son again. She tried. When she turned 18, she tried to find out where he was, but the adoption was closed. No information. She could never find him. Dorothy shook her head. And it destroyed a piece of her, a piece that never came back. Lauren stood and walked to the window. Her mind was spinning. Nancy had been a mother before. She had lost a child. She had been forced to give up her own baby. "Is there anything else?" Lauren asked without turning around. "Anything else I should know?" Dorothy hesitated. "Yes, but it's not about the first baby." Lauren turned. "Is this about me?" "It's about when you were born." Lauren's heart started beating faster. "What about when I was born?" Dorothy looked at her hands. "I don't know the details. Nancy never wanted to talk about it. But I know it was bad, really bad. She was in the hospital for days, and when she came home, she wasn't the same person. And bad how? Complications. Some kind of birth complication. Your grandmother called me at the time and said Nancy almost died. But when I tried to visit, Nancy wouldn't see me. She wouldn't see anyone. She was locked in the house for months." Lauren's legs felt weak. She walked back to the couch and sat down. "She almost died when I was born. That's what your grandmother told me. But Nancy never confirmed it. And after that, she distanced herself from everyone, even me. It took us years to talk again, and even then, it was never the same." Stephen put his arm around Lauren's shoulders. "It's okay. Breathe." But Lauren couldn't breathe properly. Everything was starting to make sense now. Nancy's fear, her extreme reaction, her desperate attempt to stop Lauren from having the baby. Nancy had nearly died when Lauren was born, and now Lauren was pregnant. And Nancy was terrified that history would repeat itself. "Aunt Dorothy," Lauren said, her voice shaking, "do you know what exactly happened? What kind of complication?" Dorothy shook her head. "I don't know. Nancy never said anything. And her grandmother died a few years later without saying anything. It's like it's a secret that should be buried forever." Lauren looked at Stephen. He had the same expression as her. They needed to find out the truth, and there was only one way to do it. Lauren needed to see the medical records from her own birth. Lauren and Stephen drove home in silence. Lauren's head was too full to talk. She needed to process everything she'd learned. Nancy had become a mother at 16. She'd been forced to give up the baby. And then, when Lauren was born, something terrible happened. When they got home, it was already night. Lauren went straight to her bedroom and opened her closet. At the back, tucked into an old box, was her birth certificate. She picked it up and looked at it closely. Nomdu Hospital, St. Mary's Hospital. Date of birth, March 15th. Mother's name, Nancy Parker. Lauren picked up her phone and looked up the hospital. It still existed. It still operated. She wrote down the address and phone number. "What are you going to do?" Stephen asked from the doorway. "I'm going there on Monday. I'm going to try to get the medical records of my birth. Will they give you this? I'm the patient. I was born there. I have a right to see my own records." Lauren put the certificate back in the box. "I need to know what happened. I need to understand." Stephen entered the room and sat on the bed next to her. "What if it's something really heavy? Something you weren't expecting? Then at least I'll know the truth, because living without knowing is killing me inside." On Sunday, Lauren tried calling Nancy 3 times. Each time, her mother didn't answer. Lauren left voicemails asking to talk, but Nancy didn't return them. On Monday morning, Lauren called off work and went to St. Mary's Hospital. It was a large, old building with red brick walls and tall windows. Lauren walked in and went straight to the medical records department. A middle-aged woman with reading glasses served at the counter. "Can I help you?" "Yes. I would like to request a copy of my medical records. I was born here 32 years ago." The woman picked up a form. Full name and date of birth. Lauren filled out the form and handed it in along with her ID and birth certificate. The woman typed the information into the computer and frowned. "Let me see. 32 years is a long time. The records from that time are still in the physical archive. I'll need to go get them from the warehouse. It might take about 20 minutes. "No problem. I'll wait." Lauren sat in the waiting area. Her feet tapped nervously. Her palms were sweating. She didn't know what she would find in these records, but she sensed it was something important, something that would change everything. 40 minutes later, the woman returned holding a folder yellowed with age. "I found it. Do you want a copy or just to see it?" "I'd like a copy, please." The woman went to the photocopier and began copying. Lauren watched the pages go by. There were a lot, more pages than she expected. For a natural birth, there shouldn't be that many pages. "There, that's $15 for the copies." Lauren paid and took the thick envelope. Her hands were shaking. She left the hospital, got into her car, and opened the envelope. She began to read. The first few pages were standard. Information about Nancy's pregnancy. Weight, height, routine checkups. Everything seemed normal until the day of delivery. Then Lauren saw the notes, and her blood ran cold. Patient went into labor at 3 in the morning. Complications began at 6 in the morning. Severe postpartum hemorrhage. Estimated blood loss of 2 liters. Patient went into hypovolemic shock. Blood pressure dropped dramatically. Emergency team called. Blood transfusion started. Lauren continued reading, her tears beginning to blur her vision. Patient had seizures. Suspected eclampsia. Medication administered. Patient remains unstable. Risk of imminent death. Family notified. Baby was born healthy at 7:15 in the morning, but mother remains in critical condition. The following pages were even worse. Medical descriptions of emergency procedures. Surgery to control the bleeding. Nancy had been in the ICU for 3 days, then another week in the hospital recovering. And then Lauren saw something that made her heart stop. A note from a hospital psychiatrist. Patient presents signs of severe postpartum trauma and depression. Expresses intense fear of the baby. Refuses to hold the child. Cries constantly. Expresses thoughts that the baby will kill her. Continued psychiatric evaluation and possible admission to a psychiatric unit are recommended. Lauren dropped the papers on the car seat and covered her face with her hands. Her mother had almost died. Her mother had bled so much that the doctors thought she was going to die. Her mother had been so traumatized that she was afraid to hold her own daughter, and Lauren never knew any of this. Everything made sense now. The emotional distance, the overprotectiveness, the irrational fear of pregnancy and childbirth. Nancy wasn't being irrational. Nancy was reliving the worst trauma of her life. Lauren picked up the phone with shaking hands and called her mother. This time, Nancy answered. "Lauren? Mom, I need to talk to you. Now. Is everything okay? Are you okay?" "No, Mom. It's not okay. I found out what happened when I was born." There was a long silence on the other end. Then Nancy said in a broken voice, "How did you find out?" "I went to the hospital. I got the medical records." Nancy let out a sob. "Lauren, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't tell you. Why didn't you ever tell me? Why did you keep this to yourself for 32 years? Because I was ashamed. Because I didn't want you to know. Because I didn't want you to feel guilty. Guilty? Mom, I was a baby. But I felt guilty. I felt guilty for being afraid of you, for not being able to hold you without shaking, for almost dying bringing you into this world." Nancy was crying now. "And I don't want you to go through the same thing. I couldn't bear to lose you, Lauren. I couldn't bear to—" Lauren leaned her head against the steering wheel, tears streaming down her face. "Mom, I need to see you. We need to talk about this properly. Come here. Please come." Lauren hung up and started the car. But something was still bothering her. The medical records explained Nancy's fear. They explained the trauma. But Lauren sensed there was more. Something that hadn't yet been said. And she was determined to find out what. Lauren arrived at Nancy's house half an hour later. The door was unlocked. She walked in to find her mother sitting on the living room couch, her eyes red and puffy from crying. "Lauren," Nancy stood up, but stood where she was, as if afraid to come closer. Lauren placed her purse on the table and took out her medical records. "I read everything, Mom, every page, Every note. Nancy looked down at the papers and covered her face with her hands. And I never wanted you to see this. Why not? Why didn't you think I had the right to know? Because I was ashamed, Nancy cried, dropping her hands. Her eyes were desperate. I was ashamed that I couldn't be strong, ashamed that I almost died, ashamed that I was afraid for my own daughter. Lauren felt her chest tighten. Mom, you don't have to be ashamed of this. You've been through a horrible trauma. Trauma that no one took seriously. Nancy sat down again, as if her legs wouldn't hold her any longer. When I finally got out of the hospital, everyone just wanted to know about the baby. No one asked how I was. No one cared about what I'd been through. Lauren sat next to her mother on the couch. Tell me everything that happened. Nancy took a deep breath, wiping away her tears. I thought I was going to die, Lauren. When the bleeding started, I felt my life slipping through my fingers. I saw the doctors running, screaming, trying to save me, and all I could think was, I'm going to die. My baby will grow up without a mother. But you didn't die. I didn't die. But a part of me died that day. Nancy looked at her hands. When I woke up in the ICU, they told me you were born, that you were healthy, that you were waiting for me. But I couldn't feel happiness. I could only feel terror. Terror of what? Of you, of holding you and starting to bleed again, of looking at you and remembering how I almost died, of being a mother and not being able to do it right because my body was broken. Nancy shook her head. It took me weeks to be able to hold you without shaking, months to be able to breastfeed you without having panic attacks. Lauren felt tears well up. I didn't know, Mom. I had no idea. Because I hid it. I pretended everything was fine. I smiled when people asked what it was like being a mother. I lied to everyone, even myself. Nancy looked at her daughter. But inside, I was destroyed, and I've never been the same person again. Lauren took her mother's hand. That's why you reacted like that when I told you about the pregnancy. You were afraid the same thing would happen to me. It's not just fear, Lauren. It's terror. It's absolute panic. Nancy squeezed her daughter's hand. I couldn't bear to see you go through what I went through. I couldn't bear to see you bleeding, to see you screaming, to see you almost dying. I'd rather die 1,000 times than see you go through that. Mom, medicine has evolved a lot since I was born. Hospitals are better prepared now. Doctors know how to deal with hemorrhages better. But it still happens. Women still die from postpartum hemorrhage. Even today, in the 21st century, I read about it. I researched it. It's one of the leading causes of maternal death. Lauren realized she needed a different approach. Mom, did you have any risk factors? Any conditions that caused the hemorrhage? Nancy hesitated. The doctors said it was a combination of things. My placenta didn't deliver properly. My uterus didn't contract as it should. My blood vessels didn't close fast enough. Could this be hereditary? It can. Some factors may be genetic. Lauren took a deep breath. Then I need to know this. I need to tell my doctor. I need to prepare myself in case it happens to me too. Nancy looked at her with wide eyes. Are you still going to go through with the pregnancy? Even knowing all this? I will, Mom. Because this baby was planned. Because I want to be a mother. And because I will do everything in my power to protect myself. What if it's not enough? Then at least I tried. At least I lived my life without letting fear control me. Nancy let go of Lauren's hand and stood up. She walked to the window and stared out. Do you think I let fear control me? I do, Mom, and I understand you. After what you've been through, it makes perfect sense. But I can't live my life based on your trauma. I need to live my own story. Nancy was silent for a long moment. Then she said, without turning around, there's something I never told you about the baby I had when I was 16. Lauren felt a shiver. What about it? He looked for me. 5 years ago. He found me through an adoption website. Lauren's heart stopped. He came to you, and you didn't tell me. I didn't tell anyone, not even Dorothy. Nancy finally turned around. He came here, We talked. He just wanted to know who I was. He wanted to know why I gave him up for adoption. And you told? I told him I was too young, that I had no choice, that I never stopped thinking about him. Nancy wiped away another tear. And you know what he said to me? He said he forgave me, that he understood, that he'd had a good life. Why didn't you ever tell me about him? Because it was another secret, another weight I carried alone. And I didn't want you to know that I had abandoned a child before having you. Lauren stood up and walked over to her mother. Mom, you didn't abandon anyone. You were a child. You were forced. Nancy hugged her daughter and began to cry for real. 32 years of pain spilling out at once. Lauren held her tightly, letting her mother finally release everything she'd been holding in for so long. When Nancy finally calmed down, she looked at Lauren. I don't want to lose you. I can't stand the thought of losing you. You won't lose me, Mom. I promise I'll do everything right. I'll follow all the doctor's orders. I'll take care of myself. Promise. I promise. But as Lauren hugged her mother again, she couldn't shake the unanswered question from her mind. If Nancy was so scared, why hadn't she told her before? Why did you wait until Lauren was pregnant to reveal everything? There was something more. Lauren felt it, and she was going to find out what. The following weeks were calmer. Nancy and Lauren started talking more. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Nancy still made comments about the dangers of pregnancy, but now Lauren understood where that fear came from. Lauren was 3 months pregnant when she scheduled her first ultrasound. She invited Nancy to come along. Nancy was hesitant at first, but then she agreed. On the day of the appointment, the three met at the clinic. Stephen held Lauren's hand. Nancy sat on the other side, her hands in her lap, clearly nervous. When Lauren's name was called, they entered the room. The doctor, a woman in her 40s named Dr. Martinez, greeted them all with a warm smile. So, shall we see this baby? Lauren lay down on the stretcher. The doctor applied cold gel to her belly and placed the transducer. The ultrasound screen lit up, and there it was, a tiny baby moving with a fast-beating heart. Look at this, Dr. Martinez said. Everything's perfect, strong, healthy heartbeat. Lauren looked at Stephen, who was teary-eyed. Then he looked at Nancy. Her mother was staring at the screen with an expression Lauren couldn't quite decipher. It wasn't happiness. It wasn't exactly fear. It was something in between. After the exam, while Stephen went to pay at the front desk, Nancy and Lauren waited in the waiting room. Did you see? Lauren asked softly. The baby's fine. Everything's going well. Nancy nodded, but didn't smile. For now. Mother, I'm sorry. I know you want me to be positive, but it's hard, Lauren. Every time I think about you being pregnant, I relive that day in the hospital. Lauren took her mother's hand. I understand. But don't you think it would be good to talk to someone about this? A therapist? I don't need a therapist. I just need you to be okay. But you're not okay, Mom. You've carried this trauma alone for over 30 years. It's not healthy. Nancy pulled her hand back. I'm dealing with it my way. But it's not working. You're still afraid. You're still panicking. That's not coping, Mom. That's just hiding. Nancy was silent. Then she said something that took Lauren by surprise. You're right. I didn't. I never have. Then let me help you now. How can you help me? You haven't been through what I've been through. You don't know what it's like. I don't know. But I want to understand. I want you to tell me everything, not just the medical facts. I want to know how you felt, what you thought, what no one let you say at the time. Nancy looked at her daughter, her eyes shining with tears. Do you really want to hear it? I want. Nancy took a deep breath. Okay, let's go home. I'll tell you everything. An hour later, the two of them were sitting in Nancy's living room. Stephen had gone to work. It was just mother and daughter. Nancy began to talk. She told me about the day she went into labor, how excited she was at first, how everything changed when the bleeding started. I saw the panic in the doctor's eyes, Nancy said, her voice shaking. They tried to hide it, tried to act like everything was under control, but I saw it. I knew I was dying. Mom, you must have been terrified. I was. But the worst part wasn't the physical pain. It was afterward, when I woke up and everyone expected me to be a perfect, happy, grateful mother. As if nothing had happened. Nobody asked you how you were. Everyone asked about the baby. No one asked about me. Nancy wiped away tears. I remember a nurse bringing you in for me to breastfeed. I was shaking so hard I almost dropped you. And you know what she said? She said I needed to calm down, that I was scaring the baby. Lauren felt anger rise. This is horrible. It was horrible. I felt like I had failed, like I wasn't good enough to be a mother. And at the same time, I was so afraid of you, afraid you would make me bleed again, afraid that just looking at you would make me die. That's why you've become distant. Yes, I loved you, Lauren, but I was afraid to show it. I was afraid to get too close and lose everything again. Nancy covered her face with her hands, and depression came soon after. I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't eat. I couldn't feel anything but emptiness and fear. Did you seek help? Your father tried to convince me, but I was ashamed. Back then, no one talked about postpartum depression. If you weren't a happy, radiant mother, you were a failure. So you suffered alone. I suffered. For years. And even when I got better, the trauma never went away. It stayed inside. Nancy touched her chest, waiting to come back. Lauren hugged her mother. I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry you went through this alone. I'm so sorry no one supported you like they should have. Nancy allowed herself to cry in her daughter's arms. I don't want you to go through the same thing, Lauren. I can't bear the thought. I know. But now it's different. Now we talk about mental health, about postpartum depression, about birth trauma. And if I ever go through something similar, I'll have you. You'll be able to help me because you understand. Nancy pulled back and looked at her daughter. Do you think I can help you, even after everything? I do, because you survived, and that gives me hope that I will survive too. Nancy cupped her daughter's face in both hands. I'll be there, at the birth. I'll be there with you, and I'll do everything to protect you. Thank you, Mom. They held each other for a long time, and for the first time in weeks, Lauren felt like maybe, just maybe, everything would be okay. But she wanted to know something from you, who are watching now. Have you ever held on to pain for a long time? Tell us in the comments. Sometimes, sharing our story can help someone going through the same thing. Lauren was 38 weeks pregnant when her contractions started. It was a Tuesday night. Stephen was beside her on the couch when she felt the first one. I think it's time, Lauren said, holding her stomach. Stephen jumped to his feet. Are you sure? It could be a false alarm. It's not a false alarm. I feel it. It's real. They grabbed the bag that had been packed for weeks and headed to the car. Stephen drove quickly but carefully. Lauren called Nancy on the way. Mom, I'm in labor. We're going to the hospital. There was silence on the other end. Then Nancy said, I'm coming. Which hospital? Memorial Hospital. The same one we agreed on. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Lauren hung up and took a deep breath through another contraction. The pain was intense, but she was prepared. She'd taken childbirth classes. She'd read every book. She'd talked to the doctor about all the risks, including bleeding. When they arrived at the hospital, they went straight to the maternity ward. The nurses took Lauren to a room and started getting everything ready. They set up monitors, checked her dilation, and took her blood pressure. 7 centimeters, the nurse said. You're doing well. Baby's heartbeat is strong. Nancy arrived 15 minutes later. She entered the room pale-faced, clearly nervous, but when she saw Lauren, she forced a smile. How are you? It hurts, but I'm fine. Nancy reached out and took her daughter's hand. You are strong, stronger than I was. Hours passed. The pain intensified. Lauren screamed, cried, and squeezed Stephen's hand until it hurt. Nancy stayed by her side the entire time, whispering encouragement, wiping the sweat from her daughter's face. At 4 a.m, Dr. Martinez came into the room. "It's time, you're 10 centimeters. Let's have this baby." Lauren began to push. Once, twice, 3 times. The pain was unbearable, but she kept going. Stephen was on one side, Nancy on the other. "One more. Lauren, the baby's almost out," Dr. Martinez yelled. Lauren pushed with everything she had. And then, a cry, a loud, powerful cry. The baby was born. "It's a girl," Dr. Martinez announced, placing the baby on Lauren's chest. Lauren looked at her daughter with tears streaming down her face. "Hi, my love. Hi." Stephen kissed Lauren's forehead. "You did it. You were amazing." Nancy was crying too, looking at her granddaughter with a mixture of joy and fear in her eyes. But then, something changed. Lauren felt something warm between her legs, very warm and very liquid. "Dr. Martinez," one of the nurses said in a strained voice, "she's bleeding." The doctor looked at her, and her face changed completely. "Postpartum hemorrhage. We need to act quickly." Suddenly, the room was in chaos. Nurses were rushing in. Doctors were being called. Someone took the baby from Lauren's arms and handed it to Stephen. "Lauren, you need to stay awake. Do you hear me?" Dr. Martinez yelled, but Lauren was getting dizzy. The room began to spin. She saw Stephen with the baby, saw the worry on his face. She saw Nancy standing in the corner, frozen, her eyes wide. And then Lauren understood. It was happening. Exactly what had happened to Nancy. The bleeding. The bleeding that wouldn't stop. "Blood pressure dropping," a nurse shouted. "We need a transfusion now," Dr. Martinez ordered. Lauren felt her body go cold. Her hands were shaking. She looked at Nancy and saw that her mother was having a panic attack. Nancy clutched her chest, breathing rapidly, her face completely white. "Mom?" Lauren managed to whisper. It was as if that word had awakened something in Nancy. She blinked, looked at her daughter bleeding on the bed, and something changed in her eyes. It was no longer fear, it was determination. Nancy walked quickly to Dr. Martinez. "I know what's happening. It happened to me when she was born. Ma'am, I need you to move out of the way." "No, listen to me," Nancy screamed with a force no one expected. "I had a postpartum hemorrhage 32 years ago. 2 liters of blood. Hypovolemic shock. I know exactly what you need to do." Dr. Martinez looked at Nancy for a second, then yelled, "Speak!" Her placenta didn't deliver completely. "I know because it happened to me. You need to do a manual check of the uterus now. And there's more. Her blood vessels won't contract on their own. It's genetic. It happened to me. You need strong uterine contraction medication immediately." Dr. Martinez looked at the nurses. "Prepare uterotonic medication. And I'll do manual review now." Nancy held Lauren's hand. "You're going to be okay. You're going to be okay because I'm here, and I'm not going to let you die." Lauren tried to speak but couldn't. She was too weak. Dr. Martinez began the procedure. The pain was excruciating. Lauren screamed. "I found it," Dr. Martinez said. "There was a piece of retained placenta. I'm removing it now." "What about the medication?" Nancy shouted. "It has already been administered," a nurse replied. The next few minutes were the longest of Lauren's life. She drifted in and out of consciousness. She heard distant voices. She felt hands touching her. She saw bright lights. And then, finally, he heard Dr. Martinez say, "The bleeding is slowing. The medication is working." Nancy collapsed into the chair beside the bed, clutching her daughter's hand so tightly her hands turned white. "You're okay. You're okay?" Lauren opened her eyes slowly. Her vision was blurry, but she could see Nancy. "Mom?" "I'm here, daughter. I'm here." "The baby?" Stephen approached with the baby wrapped in his arms. "She's fine. She's perfect. Pressure stabilizing," a nurse announced. "Bleeding controlled," another said. Dr. Martinez wiped the sweat from her forehead. "You gave us a scare, Lauren, but everything's under control now." She looked at Nancy. "Thank you." If you hadn't mentioned the genetic history and the retained placenta, we might have lost precious time. Nancy was shaking, but managed to nod. I wasn't going to let my daughter go through what I went through without a fight. Lauren squeezed her mother's hand. You saved me. You saved me first, Nancy whispered. You saved me by making me face my trauma, by making me talk about what happened. If I hadn't told you everything, I wouldn't know what to say to the doctors today. They stood like that for a long moment. Mother and daughter, two survivors of postpartum hemorrhage, two women who nearly died bringing life into the world. Stephen placed the baby in Lauren's arms. The girl's eyes were closed, sleeping peacefully, unaware of the danger she had just experienced. What are we going to name her? Stephen asked. Lauren looked at Nancy. Grace. Let's call her Grace. Nancy started crying again. Grace meant grace. It meant mercy. It meant a second chance. It's perfect, Nancy said, touching her granddaughter's little face for the first time. It's perfect. Lauren spent 3 more days in the hospital recovering. She needed a blood transfusion. She needed medication. She needed intensive care. But she survived, and Nancy stood by her side the whole time. Not as the distant, withdrawn mother she'd been for 32 years, but as the mother who had finally faced her demons, the mother who had transformed trauma into strength, the mother who had saved her own daughter's life. The cycle had been broken. History had not repeated itself, at least not in the same way, because this time there was love, there was courage, there was truth, and that made all the difference. On the morning of her 4th day in the hospital, Lauren woke up feeling better. The pain had subsided. The color had returned to her face, and Grace was sleeping peacefully in the crib next to her bed. Nancy sat in the chair next to her, staring out the window. She hadn't been home one night. She slept at the hospital, ate at the hospital, and watched over her daughter and granddaughter as if her life depended on it. Mom, Lauren called softly. Nancy turned around immediately. Are you okay? Do you need anything? I'm fine. I just wanted to talk. Nancy pulled the chair closer to the bed. She looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes. But there was something different in her eyes, a lightness that hadn't been there before. What do you want to talk about? Lauren took a deep breath. About what happened during the birth, about how you reacted. Nancy looked down. I froze at first. When I saw the blood, when I saw you in the same situation I'd been in, I just froze. But you didn't freeze. You acted. You saved my life. Because I had no choice. Because if I did nothing, I would lose you. And losing you would be worse than reliving my own trauma 1,000 times. Lauren took her mother's hand. You were amazing, Mom. You were the bravest person in that room. Nancy shook her head. I didn't feel brave. I felt terrified. But for the first time in my life, my fear didn't paralyze me. It made me act. That's what courage is. It's not the absence of fear. It's acting in spite of fear. Nancy looked at her daughter with teary eyes. When I saw you bleeding, it was like going back in time. It was like being in that delivery room again, 32 years ago. I felt the same pain, the same terror, the same certainty that I was going to die. But you weren't dying. I was. I know. And that's what woke me up. Because I realized it wasn't about me. It was about you. And you needed me to be strong. For the first time, you really needed me. Lauren squeezed her mother's hand. I've always needed you, Mom. You just never realized it because you were too busy protecting yourself. Nancy wiped away the tears that had begun to fall. You're right. I spent my entire life protecting myself, building walls, keeping my distance, all because I was afraid of getting hurt again. And now I realize I hurt myself anyway. I hurt myself by losing years of connection with you, by not being the mother you deserved, by letting my trauma control my life. Lauren felt her own tears start. You were always a good mother, Mom. You were doing the best you could with the tools you had. But it wasn't enough. And I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for being distant, for being cold, for not holding you more, for not telling you how much I loved you. You loved me, I always knew it, even when you couldn't show it. Nancy stood and sat on the edge of Lauren's bed. When you were born, I looked at you for the first time and felt two things at once: absolute love and absolute terror, and the terror was stronger. It swallowed me whole, and I let it. You didn't let it. You survived. You did what you had to do to move forward. But moving on doesn't mean living. For 32 years, I didn't live. I just existed. I just got through the days, keeping everything under control, avoiding anything that might make me feel that pain again. Lauren wiped her face with her hands. So what now? How are you feeling now? Nancy thought for a moment. Exhausted, scared, but also free. Like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Because you finally faced it. You finally talked about what happened, and you found that you can survive even talking about it. More than surviving. I was able to use my pain to save you. I was able to turn the worst thing that ever happened to me into something useful, into something that had meaning. Grace began to stir in her crib, making small sounds. Nancy looked at her granddaughter and smiled. It was a genuine smile, without fear, without reservation. "Can I get it?" Nancy asked. "Of course you can." Nancy stood up and carefully picked up Grace. She held the baby in her arms and looked at her tiny face. "Hi, Grace. Your grandma's here." Lauren watched the scene and felt her heart swell. It was the first time she'd seen a mother hold a baby without fear, without trembling, without looking like she was going to fall apart at any moment. "She's perfect," Nancy whispered. "So small, so fragile, so full of life, just like I was when I was born." Nancy looked at Lauren. "Yes, exactly like that. And I wasted so much time being afraid to love you completely because I thought I would lose you. But you didn't lose me. I'm here, and Grace is here, and the three of us are going to be okay." Nancy returned to the chair, still holding Grace. "Ma, do you know what I noticed during those minutes of labor when you were bleeding?" "What?" "That I would rather die 1,000 times than live without you. That all the fear I carried all these years was worth nothing compared to the love I feel for you. And that if I had to choose between protecting myself and saving you, I would always choose to save you." Lauren started crying again. "Mom," and I realized something else, that you are stronger than I ever was. You faced your fears. You kept going even though you knew the risks. You chose to live fully instead of just surviving. I learned that from you. You survived, and that gave me the strength to believe that I could too. Nancy rocked Grace gently. "I want to be different with her. I want to be the grandmother I couldn't be to you. I want to be there. I want to show love without fear. I want her to grow up knowing she is loved unconditionally. And I'm going to help you with that. We're going to break this cycle together." Nancy looked at her granddaughter and then at her daughter. "Thank you, Lauren, for not giving up on me, for forcing me to face my past, for giving me a second chance. Always, Mom. Always." The two stood there, mother, daughter, and granddaughter, 3 generations of strong women, each carrying their own scars, but finally together. And for the first time in 32 years, Nancy allowed love to be stronger than fear. 3 weeks later, Lauren was home with Grace. Her recovery had been slow but steady. She still felt pain sometimes, still tired easily, but she was alive. She was healthy, and she was learning how to be a mother. Nancy visited every day, sometimes twice a day. She helped with diaper changes, baths, and feedings. But more than that, she was present, truly present, not just physically, but emotionally. It was a Saturday afternoon when Lauren finally brought up the subject she'd been thinking about for days. "Mom, I was thinking about something." Nancy was rocking Grace to sleep. "About what?" "About therapy. I think it would be good for both of us, together and separately." Nancy stopped rocking for a second, then continued. "Do you think I need therapy?" "I think we both do. I almost died, Mom. I went through the same thing you did. And even though it ended well, it was still traumatic. I still wake up at night afraid I'll start bleeding again." Nancy carefully placed Grace in the crib and turned to Lauren. "Do you have nightmares?" "I do. Almost every night. I dream that I'm in the hospital, that the blood won't stop, that I lose Grace, that I lose Stephen, that I lose you." Nancy sat down next to her daughter on the couch. "I still have nightmares too. After 32 years, I still do." "Then let's go to therapy. Together. Let's process this the right way, not the way you had to process it alone." Nancy was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Okay, let's try." The following week, they began therapy. They found a psychologist specializing in birth trauma and maternal mental health. Her name was Lisa, a 50-year-old woman with a calm and welcoming demeanor. In her first session, Nancy spoke for the first time to a professional about what had happened 32 years ago. She talked about the blood, the fear, the loneliness. She talked about how no one had validated her pain, how everyone expected her to be a perfect mother when she could barely get out of bed. Lauren held her mother's hand as she cried, and when it was Lauren's turn to speak, Nancy held her daughter's hand. "The scariest thing," Lauren said, "wasn't the physical pain. It was realizing that I could die, that Grace could grow up without a mother, that Stephen could be widowed. It was thinking about everything I would lose." Lisa nodded understandingly. "Birth trauma is real and valid. You both went through life-threatening experiences. It's normal to be scared. It's normal to have nightmares. It's normal to take time to process." "But will it get better?" Nancy asked. "Because I've carried this for 32 years and it never got better. Because you never processed it. You bottled it all up inside, hoping it would go away on its own. But trauma doesn't work that way. Trauma needs to be acknowledged, validated, and worked through." Lisa looked from Nancy to Lauren. "But you're both here now. And that's a big step." The sessions continued. Weekly at first, then bi-weekly. Nancy and Lauren attended sessions together and separately. Nancy began working through old trauma, the pain of losing her first child, and the guilt she carried for not being the mother she wanted to be for Lauren. Lauren worked through the recent trauma, the fear of having another child in the future, the anxiety that something would happen to Grace, and little by little, the two began to heal. It wasn't quick. It wasn't easy. There were bad days, days when Nancy fell back into her old pattern of shutting herself down, days when Lauren had panic attacks at the sight of blood. But they kept trying, and their relationship changed completely. Nancy began sharing memories of Lauren's childhood, good memories I'd tucked away because they were too painful to revisit. She talked about the first time Lauren said, "Mama," the first time Lauren took her first steps, little moments Nancy had locked away because they made her feel like a failure. "I didn't fail," Nancy said one night as they drank tea in Lauren's kitchen. Grace was asleep in the bedroom. "I did the best I could with what I had at the time." "You did. And it was enough, Mom. I grew up knowing I was loved, even when you couldn't show it the way you wanted." Nancy smiled. "Grace will grow up different. She will grow up with a mother who isn't afraid to show love, and with a grandmother who learned, albeit late, to do the same." "It's never too late, Mom." "I hope not." Stephen walked into the kitchen from work. He greeted Nancy with a hug, something that had become routine. "How were the girls today?" "Great," Lauren said. "Grace slept all afternoon, and my mom and I spent the afternoon talking." "Really talking," Nancy added. "No fear, no hiding anything." Stephen smiled. "That's good. That's very good." That night, after Nancy left, Lauren stayed in the room watching Grace sleep. The baby was on her back, arms outstretched, fast asleep. Lauren placed her hand on her stomach, where the scars from the surgery and the fight to survive still remained, scars that would one day disappear, but would always be part of her story. She thought about Nancy, about everything her mother had been through, about everything they had been through together, and he realized something important. Nancy hadn't tried to stop her from having children because she didn't love her. Nancy had tried to stop her because she loved her too much, because she knew the pain, because she knew the price, because he didn't want his daughter to pay the same price she had. But Nancy's fear came from a place of love, a love so great it turned to terror, a love so intense it paralyzed her for decades, and now, finally, that love was free, free from fear, free from guilt, free to be just love. Lauren leaned over and kissed Grace's forehead. "You will grow up surrounded by love, my daughter. Love from your mother, love from your father, and love from your grandmother, who waited 32 years to learn to love without fear." Grace sighed in her sleep, a small, perfect sigh. And Lauren knew that everything, absolutely everything, was worth it. Sometimes, the greatest fears are born from the greatest loves. Nancy spent 32 years trapped in a trauma no one validated, in a pain no one wanted to hear. She tried to protect Lauren the only way she knew how, with fear, with distance, with silence. But love always finds a way. And when Lauren needed it most, Nancy transformed her trauma into courage. She transformed her pain into salvation. She proved that it's never too late to heal. It's never too late to start over. It's never too late to love without fear. If you or someone you know is suffering from birth trauma, know that you are not alone. Seek help. Talk about it. Heal. Now tell me, what was the most important lesson from this story for you? Leave a comment. And if this story touched you in any way, like the video, subscribe to the channel using the subscribe button or the QR code that appears on your screen, and activate the notification bell so you don't miss more moving stories like this.